when you get to the point where you can kind of laugh and you could kind of expect, you know what to expect, then you're not taken off guard, and you're able to handle it better. And the truth of the matter is, when you are divorced, you do have a bubble around you. You have a separation. You're not in the same house, and you are able to protect yourself in your bubble from the other person. It just feels like they're in your bubble sometimes because they were for so long. When I came back, I felt like a different person and I could handle the day. You have to be there for your kids if you work, functioning. There's so many things you have to do. So you have to find a way to get that energy out. And for me, exercise was really helpful. And so you don't have to defend yourself. And you just focus on what it is you need to communicate about. And that's the kids.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Just Separated podcast. I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I help people navigate the emotional, legal, and practical challenges of divorce, including high conflict and narcissist relationships. Each week, I am joined by expert guests to share guidance, tools, and strategies so you can move forward with clarity, confidence, and resilience. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many layers of divorce. Subscribe so you never miss an episode. Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. I'm your host, Karen Oman, co-founder of Divorce Workshop. Today we're going to talk about co-parenting with a narcissist, how to successfully communicate and co-parent with a narcissist. And our expert guest is Jill Kaufman. Jill is a divorce coach, therapist, mediator, co-parenting expert. After going through her own difficult divorce, she made it her life's mission to help others not have it so tough. Her books, online courses, and her transformational coaching programs help parents navigate the overwhelming process of divorce, both emotionally and practically, with less stress and more confidence and a greater sense of peace. Welcome, Jill, to the Just Separate podcast.
Thank you so much, Karen, for having me.
So I want to start asking you about, in your experience, when people first decide to divorce, do most of them realize they're actually dealing with a high conflict personality or a narcissist ex, or does that usually come up as a surprise later on?
I think a lot of people don't recognize it because they've been in it for years and they question themselves and they think it's normal and they think that, maybe they've contributed to it. So there's a real lowering of self-esteem when you are in that kind of relationship. And so you don't have perspective, you don't have confidence, and you really, you want to get out, or maybe you don't know you want to get out. Maybe the other person has decided they want to get out and then you realize it, but a lot of people don't recognize it right away.
Yeah, I didn't. I think I was telling you before we started the podcast that it took me quite a while. It was almost like a year where I can remember going, I think I am married. I was married to a high toxic or narcissist personality. And it was quite a shock that I had lived with that for years.
Yeah, no, it is a shock because, it's hard to diagnose. And especially if, you're a spouse, you're not a clinician, so you're not going to diagnose them, and people don't get diagnosed. So, there's not like a card that's going to be handed to you and saying you were married to a narcissist, so you're always going to kind of say, is that really what happened? Is that who that person was? I think it's normal to question it.
So you'd say that most people that are divorcing one of these people do have gone through what I went through or what others, where it's kind of like blind spot or something.
Yeah. It's, you question yourself and it really doesn't matter if they're diagnosed, if they are a high conflict person, whether or not they're a narcissist or some other kind of issue, it's very difficult.
So what are the patterns? Do you see, we talk about patterns, we know that we need to look at patterns, but what are the things that we should be looking for once we're out saying wow, I may be dealing with someone? Because I think the thing is, Jill, I think if we're more aware at the start, we can handle it strategically better. So what are some things that maybe you can tell our listeners that can help them going, this could be a problem?
So if your partner or ex-partner makes you question yourself, where you say that you feel a certain way or you think a certain way, and they totally minimize your feelings and they don't listen to you and they don't accept the fact that you can have different feelings than them, that's a pattern of a high conflict person. That's someone who is not accepting of other people's points of view. If the person is inflexible, um, really inflexible, where it has to be their way or the highway, that is another pattern that you want to look for. If they are not able to empathize with you, they're not able to really see things from your point of view. And what's confusing sometimes is because some people can do this sometimes, but not when it really counts. Do you know what I mean? Like they seem like they're such a good parent and they seem like they have friends that, really like them. But in the intimacy of a marital relationship, when it is the closest relationship you have, they're really not able to do, to empathize and to understand you, and they're really um, they're just going to argue their point to the end. Do you know what I mean? And make you feel wrong. That is something that is a high conflict person.
So let's kind of take that and let's dive deeper into how do you co-parent, if we call it co-parenting, or is it counter-parenting, or what do you like to call it, with somebody that is difficult? Like, we all are difficult in divorce, but I mean, who has shows traits that you said. Like what, how do we handle, because that is the biggest thing, right, is co-parenting with this type of person. So
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, so if you have can communicate with them, I mean, you really want to reestablish a relationship. And it's not going to be the same relationship you had as a marital couple. You want to establish a relationship as a co-parent. And that you want to think of like a colleague or a coworker. It's someone you don't have to really agree on everything. You don't have to understand each other. You just have to be able to communicate respectfully and consistently so that it's all about what's best for your children, right? And what's best for your children is to have a relationship where you can communicate, where you don't have to. I mean, I have clients where they can't communicate at all. I did some co-parenting work with a couple on a Zoom call, and the woman wouldn't get on her camera because she didn't want him to say anything to her about the way she looks. And like, it was just a nightmare. You know what I mean? So, like, if you can, even a relationship that's high conflict, you can do your part to lower the conflict. So Bill Eddy is a wonderful resource. The High Conflict Institute, he has a method called the BIF method. You want to be brief, informative, friendly, and firm. So the friendly piece is the part that people have trouble with. And the friendly piece is where you want to appreciate anything you can about the person. You want to say something positive. You want to say, our daughter had such a good time with you last weekend when she went to your family party. She's been talking about it all week. Like something like that, where you make them feel like you're not the enemy. You want to really get to a place where you have their guard is down, where you can well, they'll listen to you. Because if you're always disagreeing and fighting, they're not going to be open to listening to you. It's going to spiral. So you really want to, even if they're being difficult and negative, and you want to do something positive. And that's really hard, right? When you're going through this, but you're doing it for your children and you're doing it for yourself. So you're not stuck in this high conflict situation. And so the more friendly you can be, the better. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends or friends at all. It just means a friendly, respectful tone in your emails, texts, and when you talk.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I was thinking, when I started my journey 8 years ago, that was not what I was doing. Right. And I want to talk to you also about as just hit just reminded me of how many times, and I want to talk about how much time we react. We react a lot. We get attacked by these type of personalities, and we react a lot, right? Like, you're an unfit mother. You can't. You're terrible person, or whatever. You're, and so how do you not? That's another thing is, I got caught into it. I'm going to be honest with everybody. I got caught into it. I reacted, and I would sit there and I would justify everything. You don't, I'm a great mother, and there's food on the table, and so I think that a lot of our listeners would also feel that as well. I don't know if you do as well, like felt that as well, or have clients that do that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very hard not to get defensive when someone's attacking you, right? But what you have to realize is you don't have to defend yourself anymore. They can think whatever they're going to think. They can think you're a bad mother. They can say you're a bad mother. It's not true, right? Or father, whoever is listening. Um, it's not true. You know that you're a good parent. And so you don't have to defend yourself. And you just focus on what it is you need to communicate about, and that's the kids. What they think of you as a parent really doesn't matter anymore. And this is really hard to do. So you have to make sure that you're calm when you're communicating. I highly recommend email and not text, because text you can get triggered and you can react really fast. And email, you can think through, you can put it away, you can come back to it, you can let somebody else read it. Um, and if it's really that triggering a relationship, email is the best way to do it. Once you get it to a better place, you can add on those other types of communication. But, you know, you really have to not respond right away. So when you're triggered, your blood starts pumping, your heart starts racing, and your brain actually really shuts off the front prefrontal cortex, and that's the thinking part of your brain. And you're operating with the amygdala, the base of your brain, which really you only can fight or flee, fight or run away. And you're going to fight. You're being attacked, you're going to get defensive, you're going to say, how dare you say that to me? You're going to respond. So you need time between the time that you receive any kind of communication and the time that you're reacting or responding, where you can take deep breaths, listen to music, throw water on your face, go for a run, whatever it is that you need to do to calm yourself down so you can regroup and then respond in an appropriate way and use your thinking part of your brain so that you can respond. And, there are visualizations you can do, there are meditations you can do. Just figure out what it is for you that you need so that you don't respond right away. Even if you're face to face, you can say, hey, I got to run to the bathroom, or I got to take this call. You can get out of the conversation because if you're going to react right away, it's not going to be the best reaction.
And especially with these high conflict personalities, right? If you start engaging, what are they going to do? They're going to engage. And it's only human nature in most of us for anger to anger, right? But for these type, it's just escalating, and
And they
they're
love that.
yeah,
They love to get
yeah, they
you
do.
into that fight and into that escalation because they feel that they have the power over you. I got them into that.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is to learn to respond, not react. It is a hard lesson though. Like, it is hard to do. But as you said, you explain it really well with the brain and everything, because that's what happens. So I liked your point too about how when you're in person, because if you're in mediation, like, because a lot of people have to do mediation now, that's not easy. And if you're not doing shuttle mediation, you have to figure out how you're going to cope with that.
Yeah, and a point about mediation, a lot of people want to be in separate rooms, do shuttle mediation with a narcissist, but what you're missing their reaction. And that can give you a lot of information when you're mediating. So, if possible, I would at least do one session with them in the same room because you're going to get a lot of information if you can remain calm.
Yeah. If you can, I think that's great advice too. If you can remain calm, just stay there and see what they say.
Yeah.
Right. I also want to mention too, how if you're divorcing someone like this and you're co-parenting, that I think it's really, really well researched that the one parent that is secure, it can really be a buffer for the kids. I think you agree with that, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Kids only need one really safe, healthy parent to be okay. That doesn't mean they can be abused and it's okay by the other parent. But yeah, if you're the safe parent, you're doing an incredible amount for your kids.
Yeah, I was glad to hear that in my own situation, and I tell that to clients as well because we get really upset about that, right? Like, kind of worry about that.
Yeah, and we don't really have a choice because it's very hard to take away custody from a parent unless there's significant abuse or addiction or something really extreme. And so you're probably going to be parenting with a narcissist, co-parenting, and you have to be okay. You know, there's only so much you can control. You can't control what goes on over there. And so you can only be a sounding board. And you want to be careful because you don't want to say bad things about the other parent because that hurts the children. You can listen when your children come to you and talk about the other parent, and you can be empathetic, but you want to tell the child you should talk about that to your father or mother. You need to talk about that with them, and then it's up to them how they handle it. But you can't be the one to get in the middle of that because um, the other parent will blame you and say, this isn't coming from our child, this is coming from you. And it usually doesn't do anything when you try to get in the middle of that.
So, as you're a therapist, and I want to ask you, so as you have children with this person, is it generally that a lot of kids will figure this out on their own, or that is not always so?
Most of the time, yes. Most of the time the kids figure out which parent has unconditional love and is there for them and supportive, and which parent is, more difficult and has issues. That doesn't mean they're not going to have a relationship with them. They could have a very good relationship because it's different being a child of a narcissist than a spouse. You have separation from that person, especially if you're going. And I always tell people this, which is something to consider. When you're in an intact family and one parent is a narcissist or high conflict, that the children are around that person 100% of the time. When you're in a divorced situation where it's 50% of the time, they're not around the high conflict person. So that's like totally different and better than a situation where you're an intact family, which is something you don't think about. So they develop coping skills when they're with the person who is the high conflict person. Sometimes the parent is better, behaved for that 50% of the time. But they figure out how to have a relationship with them in most cases. In some cases it's extreme and you can't have a relationship with someone. But in most cases, the children, they'll grow up, they'll go their own way, and they'll be able to have a good relationship with the parent because they don't see them all the time. They're not living with them, and they can put up boundaries. They can put up healthy boundaries.
Yeah, because I think as a lot of parents who are divorcing these type of people, they do worry about the time they spend with the other. But what I like is what you're saying there is that it's not the same relationship they have with you. It's going to be a different one, right? And that's the different dynamic, right?
Right. And with as a couple, you're with each other all the time. You're going to be with each other, consistently. You have to come work together and come up with agreements. A child doesn't have to do that. A child has their own life, and then they come home, they're with the parent, and then they go out and do their own life. They're not partners with that parent. It's a very, very different relationship.
Yeah, I think that's an important fact that you mentioned that because it is a concern. Is there any other tips or anything that you would give people that are you talked about BIF, we talked about learning not to react and respond. Is there any other good tips that you want to tell people?
So I have so many resources for people like when they're going through this. There's a visualization that I love, that is the bubble technique, I call it. And it's where you have a bubble surrounding you that's really, safe, and nobody can come into your bubble. And your soon to be ex or your ex has their own bubble, and it's like far, far away. And then they do something or say something, and it starts to come over to your bubble, and you're getting stressed, and you're like, oh no, how am I going to react? And you visualize a golden waterfall coming from the sky down in between your two bubbles, pushing the other person's bubble away. So you're still in your bubble. And the truth of the matter is, when you are divorced, you do have a bubble around you. You have a separation. You're not in the same house, and you are able to protect yourself in your bubble from the other person. It just feels like they're in your bubble sometimes because they were for so long. You know what I mean? But as you go through this, and when you're divorced, you really are protected from them. And you have to remember that. And you have to, a visualization is really a good way to think about it.
Would you suggest they do that often?
As much as they need it, you can think about that. You can use, there are tons of different visualizations and ways to kind of ground yourself and separate yourself. You can use self-talk. CBT is a great tool, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you change, like you have to realize that you're having all these thoughts. Oh no, what are they going to say? Oh no, they're going to provoke me. And then you can say to yourself, you know what? They can say anything they want. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to be okay. And so changing that self-talk, I actually tell people to write it down. That's a really good tool for people also to use.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, I think it's a practice, right? Because you can get a really nasty email, and you're going to be really good for the first while, but you need to practice it. You need to, even if you need to write it out yourself, like the Biff method, you really need to practice these things. You need to practice Jill's bubble. You need to practice the these are practices, because if you've been in that marriage 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you're pretty well got some pretty good trauma bonding going on there, right, Jill?
Absolutely. Oh, it takes a while to really get that you're not married anymore. Like that they don't have the same impact on you, that it doesn't matter what they say. They can, I mean, that's what I tell parents, that clients that I work with, they're like, well, they're going to say this. And I'm like, who cares? They can say whatever they want, but it's that, that habit, that bond that you had, the trauma bond, that is going to, break at some point, but it takes time and it takes work to get there.
Yeah, I think it took me personally a few years where if I would get something legally, where I would be like, my whole system was like, "Whew," like, and that was that window of tolerance that I wasn't in very often when it came to him, right? So I just want people to be, have a lot of patience with themselves, because it's not a quick fix. It takes time.
No, people say like, oh yeah, it's been 3 months. I should know, I should be able to handle this. No, it takes a long time. You're going to get better and better at it as you go, but it takes a while.
Yeah, and what about grounding? Do you ever use grounding?
Yeah, I mean, grounding, you could Google grounding. There's a million
Mm-hmm.
grounding techniques. The one is like looking around you and naming different things, talking about all five senses and what you're smelling, what you're hearing, what you're feeling, what you're seeing, like there's a ton of really good grounding techniques. There's mindfulness, like where you take an object and you describe it. I really like the feel of this pen, and I like the color, and I like the way it writes. And you can do it with any object. But what it does is it takes your mind off of the reaction that you're feeling, the experience of your body reacting, and it puts your mind into something else. So there's a ton of techniques. And music, I love music. Music is really helpful. It really helps you calm down and relax. So, there's tons and tons of tools like this to help you as you go through this experience, because it's
Yeah, and
not easy.
it's not easy. And I was just thinking there, like, before you have to go to your lawyers, or you have a meeting or a mediation, whatever, your body could be ramping up. And so some of these tools that you're talking about would be really helpful for them before they do the mediation or litigation, or even transition times between, like, that's also I'm a child of divorce, and those were pretty tricky days,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah.
your energy, your kids can sometimes feel that, right? So, um,
Absolutely. And it's so important for you to be okay and stable so that your kids can be stable. If you're all, sad, I'm going to miss you, and like start, showing emotion, that's going to negatively impact kids. So you really do want to be grounded, and make sure that you're in a good place. And that's so true for mediation. I would also take things to the mediation that can help you. Like they have those fidget spinners, or maybe chewing gum is good for some people, or a glass, a water bottle, or some kind of something that during the time that you're there you can do so that you can calm yourself down.
Yeah, I used to give my grieving clients, and I should start that with my divorce ones too, is like a worry stone. So it's just this little stone in their
Yep.
pocket, just so they can because we're so anxious before that. So the build up to, especially, you know, I can feel
Oh
that.
yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It's stressful. The whole experience is very stressful. So I love the worry rock. Yeah, I forgot about that. I used to have one of those, and it is really good. Also, those squeeze balls. Do you know those?
Hmm.
Like they have squeeze balls. There's lots of things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to also mention is if you're divorcing someone like this, the post-divorce abuse can be quite it doesn't it's not we wish it would just be nice and flexible and you would have great co-parenting, but I just want to touch briefly upon like this is post-divorce abuse can happen with these people, and if you just want to touch briefly on that.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's really difficult because you have things in your agreement, and maybe they're not abiding by it. And they're always, you know, early, they're late to come drop them off, or they change the plans, or whatever it is. There's so many things that they can do that it's really hard to get them to abide by these things, except, you don't want to bring them back to court every time if they're 15 minutes late or early or whatever. So you really have to choose your battles, right? And then when it's something that, you can put a boundary up, you set boundaries. So you want to set healthy boundaries, in a way where they can't take advantage of you as much. But you also, want to let some of it go, because, or else you're going to be upset and angry all the time. Um, there's lots of creative solutions that you can find for what they're doing. But another way that they abuse you is by bringing you back to court for a lot of different things. And, that can get very expensive and very stressful. So you want to get professionals involved who have experience with these type of people to help you handle it better. But yeah, post-divorce abuse is a thing, and it's really difficult because you feel like it's never going to end.
Yeah, I just wanted to make note that for anyone that's just listening, because it is a Just Separated podcast, if you are divorcing someone, I think the team approach is really well known now in the divorce world, right? You really need, I often say like my metaphor is the mediator, the lawyer is a surgeon, but you need those teammates around you, like someone like you or myself, a financial advisor, uh, accountant,
A parent
therapist,
coordinator
parent
is
coordinator.
I
Yeah.
have a very high conflict divorce I'm working on right now, and the parent coordinator is the only way they're getting the parent to do anything to support the other parent's relationship, and to go back and forth between the two. So there are things out there that are helpful. Um, it's unfortunate that that has to happen, but there are things for people.
Yeah, and one more quick thing too is about boundaries, right? We talked a lot about, you have to have boundaries, but I also want to mention that you need to have internal boundaries too, right? You have to start changing the way you refer, like you talk about yourself, but also how you talk with them, right? Because as you said, like you don't care what they think of you anymore, but inside you may, but you have to change yourself. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can say I don't care, but it takes a while not to care, right? And I think, it's okay that you're feeling that way. Just remember that, you don't have to think about them in the same way that you used to. So if you can convince yourself, you know what? They can think whatever they want. I'm okay. That's the self-talk that I was talking about. Even if you don't believe it at first, say it to yourself, and eventually you will get there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of there's a lot of talk about external boundaries in divorce world. You know, make sure he doesn't come in the house or but it's still when you're dealing with someone like this, it's a little different. It's because you have to work on not, as you said, with not reacting, learning to communicate. the whole gamut of things. And I think if people are listening and if they're aware of this, they can do it much better than I did. Right? Because I didn't know what I was doing
Right.
because there wasn't as much support systems back then.
No, there wasn't as much information. There's so much information out there. And, the interesting thing, you haven't mentioned this, Karen, but a lot of times the narcissist will tell you you're a narcissist because, that word is out there so much. So then you start thinking, am I a narcissist? And you start questioning yourself. But if you're questioning yourself, you're probably not a narcissist. Narcissists don't think they are.
No, that's hilarious though, right? Like the
Yeah.
games that they play.
Yeah.
And also I want to just mention, like, we look for patterns, right? There are always predictably bad behavior patterns. It's always the same, right? I knew, I would write a letter and I knew I'd get in trouble. Like it was getting to that point where I'm like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble for that one. And I did. Like it was just always, if you guys can always, it's not funny, but it is, because after a while, it's always the same patterns of bad behavior.
Well, what you're saying is so important, I think, because when you get to the point where you can kind of laugh and you could kind of expect, what to expect, then you're not taken off guard, and you're able to handle it better. It's when you expect them to react normally, like what you consider normal, and you get upset. That's when it's harder. So when you get to a point where you're like, yep, there's going to be a reaction, what's going to happen, then it's almost easier to handle.
Yeah. And I just want to touch down on, there's a grief component here, right? Because and that's my field, but I just, I feel for everybody in this because there is a grief component of understanding who you're divorcing. It is radically accepting who you're divorcing. And that is a lot too, right? Because who you brought children with, like male or female. There are female narcissists and high toxic females, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot there too that we haven't talked about, but I know I felt it too. And I want to bring up, what's your thoughts on self-compassion?
I mean,
Using
meaning,
it as a way to help you through all this, like as in,
yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned a little bit before that you have to be patient with yourself, and you have to be kind with yourself, and really treat yourself as you would a good friend. Like, pretend you're talking to a good friend when you talk to yourself. I think people are so often so hard on themselves, like, I should be able to handle this, and I can't believe they call themselves weak when it's nobody's weak who's divorcing someone who's high conflict. Every day you wake up, every day you deal with all the things that you have to deal with, that is a success, and you should pat yourself on the back and feel good about, because it's proof that you are really strong. I mean, nobody's weak who's going through any divorce, like, divorce is really, really difficult. So yeah, you need to be really kind to yourself during this whole process and give yourself a break. And yeah, if you lose on the kids once because you're just emotionally not able to handle it, kids will be okay. You know what I mean? They'll get it, and you apologize and you move forward.
Yeah, and one of the things I also want to say is they will not change. I know this is out there. I just want to repeat it. They won't change. You could try all your might. You tried in your marriage, probably. They won't change in divorce, and they might, most of them even ramp up. So just be mindful of that.
Oh yeah, you're the enemy, and so instead of being, on the same side, married to each other, you're now the enemy. So it usually ramps up, and it's more difficult for a while.
So before we wrap up, did I forget anything? You want to mention anything else?
Well, you did talk about grief. I just wanted to say that, like, grief, the 5 stages of grief, denial, bargaining, sadness, anger, and eventually acceptance, is different for everybody, so you may be 2 years out and still be experiencing some grief, and that's okay. And you have to heal however you're going to heal. But don't try to do this alone. You know what I mean? Get support. There's so much support out there. There's post-divorce support groups. I'm actually starting one soon. And, like, you want to get with people who understand what you're going through, because that really helps the healing process.
Yeah, I think there's a naivety that once you've separated, divorced, that there's nothing, no work left to do, and we're both telling you there is still some work to do, right? And
Yeah.
grief is one of those components, right? It comes in and out because there's many, many layers to that. But anyways, I always ask my guests this last question before we say goodbye. So for someone who just separated, whether they left or were left, what advice would you give them to help them navigate those overwhelming early days?
So the early days are going to be, you're kind of in shock, and you're not thinking well, and you're not, functioning well. I remember I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I lost 2 sizes. It was a great diet, the divorce diet, but I wasn't being healthy, like it was bad. But what I started doing, I figured out, I started exercising, and it really helped. Like, just anything you can do, go for walks. I did this. I used to bike, and then I would go to these stairs that were these stadium stairs that were near my house, and I would listen to music and just run up and down these stairs. And when I came back, I felt like a different person, and I could handle the day. You have to be there for your kids if you work, functioning. There's so many things you have to do, so you have to find a way to get that energy out. And for me, exercise was really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. So, where can they get in touch with you? And I know you have lots of courses and coaching and like you're, so tell us all about where they can get in touch with you, Jill.
So my website is divorcecoachjill.com, and I have a group coaching program. I do individual coaching. I run a free Facebook group called Separation and Divorce Support Community. And then I do have a book, an online course, and some other offers. But yeah, those are the main ones. So divorcecoachjill.com is most of where you can get in touch with me.
Well, I know you've been doing this a long time, and you can tell you have a wealth of experience and wealth of knowledge. And I think you've probably helped so many people. So I really appreciate you coming on the Just Separate podcast. And thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Karen. It was great to be here.
Thanks for joining today's conversation with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guests, and don't forget to follow us on Spotify and our YouTube channel at divorceworkshop.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. And for a complete guide to navigating separation and divorce, check out the Just Separated workbook on Amazon. It covers emotions, co-parenting, finances, legal insights, and recovery. A must-have for anyone going through separation or divorce.